Shalom friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm David Tablante, founder of Sovereign Sentinels, and today we're going to talk about why things are the way they are. Okay, we're going to talk about history. And I've already done this video, but unfortunately I have to do a retake because there were some quality issues that fortunately have already been fixed. Okay, so we're going to talk about why things are the way they are. Why is the sexual marketplace so monetized? We're going to talk about the monetization, the hyper monetization of the sexual marketplace, and why pay-for-play is increasing. This and why women are becoming 304s, and what's with the LGBTQI ABCDEFG plus agenda and the wokeification of society. All of this has actually happened before, repeatedly for thousands of years. In fact, we can trace this back to the origins of human civilization, which is, of course, the Sumerian tradition, the Sumerian religion, the Sumerian civilization that existed 5,000 years ago during the Bronze Age, during the dawn of humankind. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So, one of the things that I spent a lot of time on, in fact, I've wasted a bunch of time on, is me being unable to comprehend why the world is the way it is. Okay, for instance, we're going to see women becoming unwifeable, women stacking up body counts, and why are they becoming 304s? I know that the elites have something to do with this, but it's not even necessarily the elites per se. I think the issue is quite systemic, and history can be quite cyclical. History can be quite dialectical. So, by us not being able to know what happened beforehand makes us more surprised, makes us more react violently towards the new things that are happening, right? But that's because we do not have enough context of what happened before. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. Back in the day, when you actually study history, sex and prostitution, pay for play, and what people call as degeneracy, fucking around, tons of multiple partners, right? That wasn't actually necessarily a sin back then. People didn't really have this Judean, Abrahamic concept of good and evil, okay? That we didn't really moralize everything. Abortions were much more common than you think. People think that back in the day, people had a negative view against abortions and against even homosexuality or having tons of sex, and that really wasn't the case back in the day, especially our pagan ancestors were much more progressive. The things that we describe as progressive were actually the original traditional conservative values, and that Christianity and the rise of the Abrahamic Judean paradigm, with Christianity, Islam, and even before that, Judaism, was actually, if you study history, the Judean paradigm, or the Yehudaya, as I described in my intro video, was the original woke movement, folks. That was the original woke movement. The things that we see with supposed traditional conservative values, which weren't traditional at all, because macro-historically speaking, the traditional conservative values were actually hyper-polygyny, prostitution, abortion. Those were actually the original values that we had during the dawn of human civilization. That was actually what made us civilized. That's what actually separated us from animals, is by having the pagan values of, you could even say Nietzschean values. Like, people were much more Nietzschean without even having to read Nietzsche, because Nietzsche obviously came at a much later time. But like, people just weren't that moralizing. They weren't hypocrites about it. Even the elites weren't hypocrites about it. They didn't really have to hide this stuff. In fact, if you study Egyptian mythology, there was tons of murder, tons of rape, tons of incest, tons of hyper-polygenizing and all of these things, tons of waging war. They didn't even hide it, and they didn't even present it as a bad thing per se. It was just a natural, integral part of life. Not that I say that those are indeed moral or anything. It's not even. It's not a case of good versus bad. It's just a thing of it is what it is, or c'est la vie. That's just how life worked back in the day. And so if you do not have the context of history, you're going to see a lot of new stuff, which is nothing new, okay? This ties back into the Bible verse of Ecclesiastes 1 verse 9, or Kohelet Paraik Aleph Pasuk Tet in Hebrew. Mashaya Hushe Mashnasa Hushe Ase Venka Khadashtachat Hashemesh. I'm going to repeat that. Mashaya Hushe Mashnasa Hushe Ase Venka Khadashtachat Hashemesh. Okay. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun, or something like that. I forgot the English term. I actually know the Hebrew term much better. The Hebrew verse. Okay, the Hebrew version much better. So yeah, what has been done will be done again. What has happened will happen again. There's nothing new under the sun. That's basically the lesson of this video, is that when we see the women, especially the women, I haven't even talked about that yet. So back in the day, there were this women called Kadishtus, or Kedesha in Hebrew. Kadishtu, I think, is the Sumer Babylonian term, but then in Hebrew it was Kedesha. Even this term was written in the Bible in the book of Genesis with the story of Tamar in, I think it was Judea, one of the patriarchs of the Hebrew people, which eventually became the Israelites. Okay, so back in the day when people were still pagan, people were still practicing their pagan traditional polytheistic beliefs. People who can afford to pay a tribute to the goddess of fertility, which was Inanna in Sumerian tradition, but it later became known as Ishtar in the Babylonian tradition. Men would pay tribute to the Kedesha, or to the Kadishtu, and after you pay your tribute, then you would have sex with a temple sex priestess. Okay, this is once again temple sex priestess. This was not viewed as something immoral. In fact, this was a clerical role. Okay, this is a function of the clergy. You would actually pay a tribute to the temple, to the goddess of fertility, and then you would have sex with her. You'd have sex with her in that same place in the temple, right? So people back in the day were already practicing a primitive form of, you could say, pay-for-play, or like a physical OnlyFans. Like, you'd give your tribute, okay, you'd give your donation, and then the temple sex priestess would have sex with you. But it wasn't in the context of a ritual. Okay, it was in the context of a ritual, of course, because you pay tribute to the goddess of fertility, and then you had the ritual sex. So that gave it the context of like, that's because you're giving praise, you're giving tribute, you're worshiping the goddess of fertility. So it's not a bad thing. Right? It's not a bad thing. But nowadays we're seeing the rise of OnlyFans and the rise of the increasingly hyper-monetized sexual marketplace. And it's like a parallel to the Kadishtus and to the Kedesha of the past, of the goddess of fertility, Inanna or Ishtar, or some even say Asherah, in the Canaanite tradition. So, yeah. And people nowadays, since they are still stuck to the Abrahamic, Judean, or Judeo-Christian, whatever that means, to the Christian or to the Islamic paradigm of morality, virtues, and ethics, or the Abrahamic value system, they are not able to adjust to the changing world order. The world is changing, and it's not only about geopolitics and economics, it's also about morals and values and virtues and ethics. And for those people who are still not able to adjust to the changing world order, then unfortunately for you, you're not going to have a good time. In fact, I think you're going to have a bad time because you're not able to adjust. Okay, it's like what Charles Darwin said. I forgot the exact quote, but like, it is not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species to survive. It is the species that is most adaptable to change. That is most adaptable. The one that has the ability to adapt to the changing environment is the species that survives. This is survival of the fittest at the end of the day. And we have the term in Tagalog, matira matibay. Matira matibay means those who are strong, those who are fit enough, are those who are going to survive, are those who are going to remain. Matira matibay. Okay? And so if you're not willing to let go of the Judean indoctrination that we've given at birth, because I myself have been raised as a Christian, specifically Roman Catholic, okay? Because, Filipinos, we most of us grew up as Roman Catholics, although most people nowadays don't even practice their religion per se. We only go to church when it's a special occasion. But yeah, so we have been raised as Roman Catholics, so we've been brainwashed in the Judean paradigm. And if you're red-pilled, we all know that religion is just among the ideological state apparatuses or ideological state apparatuses. ISA, okay? These are mechanisms used by the oligarchy, used by the elites in order to tame us, in order to domesticate us, so that we stay or we remain as NPCs. Meanwhile, the oligarchs who create the ideological state apparatuses, those who create the education system, those who support the religious system, they don't believe in the Kool-Aid themselves. They do not believe in their own propaganda that they create themselves. Well, they pretend that they follow what they preach, but actually they don't. And that's because if they follow what they preach, like what they teach in school or what they preach in the church, if they follow that, then they're not going to be the elites to begin with, okay? And here in Sovereign Sentinels, what we teach is to become the top 1%, is to become the ruling class. I don't believe in coping. I don't believe in, the elites are doing this, the elites are doing that. They're so hypocritical. Nothing ever good comes from complaining, you guys. Instead of complaining, instead of bitching about things, instead of moaning about how the elites are this and how the elites are that, of course, we do not have to copy the bad things that they're doing, but what I'm saying is that we can still emulate a lot of the good things that they do, okay, so that we may become the elites ourselves. And even if we do not become the elites ourselves, at least we can go as close as possible to the top 0.1% is what I'm saying, okay? So, yeah, I think I've discussed what needs to be discussed, and yeah, I still have more topics to talk about. I don't think I'm ever gonna run out of topics to talk about, and the self-improvement or collective improvement channels, they just tend to stick in one niche anyway. So I've seen that the YouTube game is more like preaching the same thing over and over, but packaging it in different forms. So because people, it's not about how much knowledge you have, it's about how you apply the knowledge. And of course, you wouldn't be able to apply the knowledge if I don't give you the knowledge again and again. It's like deprogramming the brainwashing and indoctrination that the powers that be, through their ideological state apparatuses, have given to us from birth, okay? By deprogramming our minds and instead studying the elites, studying the oligarchy, studying the top 1% of men that in their respective fields. By emulating the elites, we can become as close as, if not the next generation of the elites, is my praxeology here in Sovereign Sentinels. Okay? So yeah, that's all for now. No voting, no fighting, only leaving. Okay? Only leaving. Okay? You guys need to prepare for your exodus before 2030 arrives, because once 2030 arrives and you still haven't dealt with your online income skill, you still haven't dealt with learning a second language, especially Tagalog, because that's the thing that going to the Philippines is what I'm able to help you the most with, okay? And if you still don't have your foreign domicile, then you're gonna get fucked, okay? You cannot vote your way, you cannot fight your way out of the agenda of 2030. We all know that the First World West is ground zero for the agenda. You guys need to wake the fuck up, okay? You guys need to wake the fuck up. There's no voting out of this, there's no fighting your way out of this, only leaving, okay? No voting, no fighting, only leaving. Thanks, guys.